Good evening. I'll call this meeting of the Cartersville City Council to order. If you'll please stand for our invocation and pledge.
Let's bow our head for a moment of silent prayer. Amen.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Keeling, the roll, please.
Carrie Hodge, Ward 1. Here. Jay Stepp, Ward 2.
Here.
Louis Tonsfire, Ward 3.
Here.
Lindsay McDaniel, Ward 4.
Here.
Diane Tate, Ward 5.
Here.
Lori Pruitt, Ward 6.
Thank you, Connie. Our first order of business is to get my mic stand to stand up. Next order of business is to approve our council meeting minutes from our February the 5th meeting. Council, you've had these well in advance of tonight. Had an opportunity to review them. Chair will entertain any edits, additions, deletions, or if there are none, a motion would be in order.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved unanimously. We have our fiscal year 2014 audit presentation. Tom, if you'll kick that off for us, please, sir.
Honorable Mayor and Council, Tom Carmichael with Carr Riggs and Ingram is here. They're the external auditor we hired last year. I will now turn the program over to him for his presentation. He'll be presenting the 2014 financials.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, on behalf of our firm and the team from our office that worked on your engagement, I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight and to make this presentation. Before I get started, I just want to quickly express our thanks to Tom and the members of his team on the finance department, and to your entire city management team for their assistance in helping us complete the audit. We certainly found your records in order, and everyone more than willing to assist us when needed. Just real quickly, just want to give you an overview of kind of what I want to cover tonight. Just want to just quickly tell you a little bit about our firm, talk a little bit about our audit approach, hit on the general fund, just a very high level, talk about your enterprise funds, just touch on your pension plan, your post-employment health care plan, give you a high-level summary of your capital assets and your long-term debt, then just touch on some required communications that we as auditors are required to have. Certainly have questions at the end, but by all means, certainly feel free to interrupt me if there's anything you'd like me to elaborate on as we're going through. Carr Riggs and Ingram, we're currently the largest CPA firm in the South, the 22nd largest nationally, 42 locations in 9 states, 1,250 professionals, 200 partners, but most importantly to you, 450 governmental clients. So I just always like to make that point that we are a regional firm and we have those resources to bring to bear when and if needed. Before I talk about our audit approach, just quickly, just to tell you our responsibilities and reports that we as auditors provide. There are really 3. The first 2 is our audit opinion, which accompanies your audit report, your CAFRA. It was an unmodified, clean opinion. There's also a report on internal control and on compliance with laws and regulations. There were no deficiencies in your internal control or any instances of non-compliance that we were required to communicate to you. And then last is our required communications with the council, board of governance, with any client. It's a standard report, and it's really just our formal written communication that just covers really some of the things that I'll talk about a little bit later. So an audit approach, I always just kind of like to cover, when you talk about an audit, what is it that we're doing? We employ what's called a risk-based audit approach. It's a cascade effect of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which means that all those provisions made their way all the way down from publicly traded companies to cities and counties, municipalities your size, and privately held small companies. And what those standards require us as auditors to do is understand the entity and its environment, including that internal control structure. Then we're required to give rigorous risk assessments, perform those, and then we're required to link the audit procedures that we perform to those risks. So in terms of understanding the internal controls, we evaluate how those controls are designed. And what I mean by controls are the policies and procedures that your management team has in place to account and properly account for the transactions and accounting records. So we evaluate how they're designed, we perform walkthroughs on those controls, and then we determine if those key controls were in fact implemented. So in looking at the city of Cartersville, when we did our risk assessment, we looked at economic conditions. That's a given with any client that we're working with nowadays. We looked at revenue recognition, accounts payable cutoff, and then certainly compliance with laws and regulations. Those were not the only risks, but the primary risks that we identified. So the audit procedures that we performed to address those risks, we tested your accounts receivable and your revenue recognition. We tested accounts payable for unrecorded liabilities. And then from a compliance perspective, we tested your sales tax expenditures. Again, just at a high level to assess those risks. There were numerous other procedures that we performed, but those were the procedures we were performing to assess those risks that I identified. So moving on to the general fund, just at a high level, you can see I've just shown you your 2014 budget versus your 2014 actual and your 2013 actual. Really, I'm not going to go through all those numbers. I just want to point out that you see your actual deficiency in 2014 versus 2013 was actually an improvement of a little under $800,000. So there was a $500,000 increase improvement in your revenues and over a $275,000 improvement or decrease in your expenditures on the general fund.
That ending fund balance, though, it did take a little hit, and I guess in discussing that, that's roughly equivalent to what we used to pay the cans off on the fire station. All right.
And I'll talk a little bit more about the fund balance too, but yeah, rolling that forward, your beginning fund balance was a little over $4.5 million. You take your net change of a deficit of $931,000, you're down to a fund balance of just a little over $3.6 million. Okay. So just to compare budget to actual on the general fund, again, I won't go through all of them, but you can see your budgeted revenues were $34.5 million, your actual revenues $33.6 million. The only significant variance there, of course, there's no surprise to anyone, was your actual property taxes were about $936,000 below budget there. Moving to the expenditures on the general fund, there's really no significant variances that we see there. Actually, there were one or two instances that were, what we consider to be, slightly over budget, but nothing, actually in total, you were $26,000 under your budget. 38.2 million was your budget. 38,184,000 came in actual. So actually, all netted together, $26,000 below budget. This last slide here on the general fund, I just kind of like to show this. That's just the trend of your fund balance over the years. You can see going from 2010 to 2014. Of course, as there's been deficits in those years, it does pull your fund balance down. I get asked the question a lot, well, what should we have in fund balance? And I can tell you that every city, municipality is different. I mean, it depends on a lot of different factors. Normally what you will hear, is that at a minimum maybe 2 months of your operating expenditures, and in your case that would be $6.4 million. Having said that, you have to keep in mind this is just a snapshot as of June 30th, and plus, the city has significant fund balances in your proprietary funds as well outside of the general fund. So just to give you a snapshot now, moving into the proprietary funds, your water and sewer fund, I'm just going to focus really on your operating income there. You can see about a $300,000 increase year over year comparing 2014 to 2013. Your operating income, $3,297,000 for 2014. $2,999,000 the year before, so again a $300,000 increase, primarily driven by about a $650,000 increase in your revenues. So your net change in that fund was $2.2 million, $2,244,000. You add that to your beginning net position of $98,801,000, leaves you with a net position in the water and sewer fund of a little over $101,000 for the year. The next, just to give you a snapshot of the electric fund, you can see again, I'm going to focus on your operating income there. I'm not going to go through all those numbers with you, but you can see a significant improvement there as well, whereas your operating income for 2014 was $1,203,000. versus $152,000 the year before. So, coming down after all your net transfers, you actually had a net positive change of $760,000 in that fund for 2014, added to your net position at the beginning of the year of $19,454, left you with a net position at the end of the year of $20,214,000. And last on the enterprise funds, just your gas fund. You can see your operating income, there's actually a decline there. A significant piece of that was just your margins had declined there. From what we can see, your gas prices were up and your margins just tightened pretty significantly. There were some large items flowing through here. There was a capital contribution, which basically was just the infrastructure that was transferred from the building authority. Bringing that operating income of $2,712,000 down after the capital contributions and your transfers. You had a net change during the year of $5,995,000 added to your net position at the beginning of the year of $16,131,000, leaves you with a net position in that fund at the end of the year of $22,126,000.
The capital contribution, would that be the Highland 75 stuff? Okay.
The next slide is just to give you a high-level, snapshot at the pension plan and your OPEB plan. And the point I really just wanted to make here was, if you look, and these numbers are, coming straight off your actuarial reports, is that, it is showing that the pension fund was actually overfunded at January 1, 2014. Again, those valuations change every year. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's still the position now, but that's certainly a significant improvement over the last 3 or 4 years trend there. So it's a good position at least to be in. The OPEB plan, of course, it's an unfunded plan, but that's just a snapshot of what the actuarial liability of that plan was at the actuarial date, which was actually July 1, 2013. It was a little over $14 million. Next slide is just a snapshot of the city's capital assets between your governmental activities and your business activities. But just so you can see, again, this is just cost, undepreciated cost, doesn't represent any adjustments for fair market value or anything like that, but a little over $400 million. So just to give you a snapshot there. And then last on the numbers that I want to cover is just to give you a snapshot of the city's long-term debt position, kind of broken down between governmental and business. You can see in total long-term debt position just a little under $40 million, $39,988,000.
I do have a question on that. Maybe
Yes.
somebody here can answer that. Our, I guess Dan, I guess I'll ask you or Mr. Carmichael, either way, or Tom. The remaining payments regarding Highland 75 on some of the utility bonds?
Is any of that on
Is that
long-term
captured
debt?
in the long-term debt, or is that captured somewhere else, or is that not even on our financials?
Through the Cartersville Building Authority, and that's not on
Okay, thank you.
All right. So this is probably school debt then, the GO? Yeah.
Thank you, Tom.
CBA and Varsity JDA, so it's separate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and so moving off the numbers, the last thing I really just want to cover is, again, there's a report that you have that's bound separately from the CAFRA and the audited financial statements. And again, it is just our formal communication with you as the council, and it's intended to cover basically the significant audit findings or communications, any corrected or uncorrected misstatements. I can tell you that there were no journal entries that we felt needed to be recorded, which I can tell you is very unusual. We don't see that a lot. Normally we are making and proposing a number of journal entries, so I commend your staff for that. Y'all have a clean set of books. The only one item that we did identify, and it's listed in your report there, was just one journal entry which we all agreed was not material, so it was waived, but we are just required to communicate that to you with the board. And really I think that was more related with just the timing of the information more than anything, and how it was received. So then next, just we formally required to communicate any difficulties or disagreements that we had with management. Of course there were none. I'm telling you that now, but it's certainly addressed in that report as well. That covers what I, needed to get through. Be happy to answer any questions anybody may have.
So we got a clean opinion, and all the enterprise funds are in the black, and the general fund balance took a little bit of a hit.
Mayor, I've got a question.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Carmichael. Do you mind giving me an example of testing of accounts receivable and revenue recognition? Just one example.
Yes, ma'am. What we will do is we will look at your accounts receivable off of your enterprise funds or even on the general fund. And then we will actually look to see the collections on those funds. So if there's a receivable for sales tax monies or even your property tax receivables, we look to see that money was actually collected to test its validity of what was recorded there.
And I just have one quick one. On the electric fund, from last year, we went from 152,000 operating income to 1.2+ million. How did it change that much?
I think the significant piece of that was there was about a $1.6 million revenue stream that came from MEAG. It was a refund that generated that out of MEAG.
It's year-end true-up kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions about the audit? Thank you, Mr. Carmichael. Our next item.
Mayor, excuse me, just my compliments to our staff. And I mean, we got a clean judgment, and I'm very appreciative of that in Tom. Thank you. Dan.
Thank you. Just so you know, I've written a note to do that at the end.
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry, Mayor. Sorry.
We'll do it again at the end. That's fine. No, it's certainly no harm in complimenting folks for a job well done. We have a couple of, actually, the first reading of an ordinance. This is an amendment to the alcohol ordinance. Mr. Menino.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you had noted, this is an amendment to the alcohol ordinance coming out of the council vision in retreat session. The proposed change takes the currently allowed beer and wine sales with cigar shops and adds distilled spirits to that with no other changes. The Alcohol Control Board did hear this and did recommend this for approval.
Okay. Any discussion on this proposed change? All right, this is a first reading of this item, and we'll take this up for final consideration at our next meeting, which will be the first Thursday in March. The next item, we do have a couple of first readings of zoning and annexation requests. Richard, if you'll get us started with file T1401, please.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a matter of housekeeping with minor revisions. In the middle of 2012, Council approved a major revision to the sign ordinance. Since then, because our department issues the sign permits and enforces the ordinance, we've seen that there's a need for clarification and just some minor tweaks. We've gotten a few requests from businesses, and City Attorney's Office has reviewed the following changes. Planning Commission recommended approval of what I'm going to be going over with you, the one-page memo. And so just stop me at any time if you have questions. The first two are definitions. Right now, our definition of what a billboard actually is and what a sign actually is not 100% clear, in the sense that there is a very, very, very small possibility that a three-sided billboard or a three-sided sign might be allowed, given different height and size qualities. And so it may be more appropriate to clarify those definitions and just add a note saying a billboard can have no more than two faces, a sign can have no more than two faces. The next,
Within the entire city, there's no boundary on that.
this is within the entire city. Yes, ma'am. Also, we do not currently have a definition in the sign ordinance of the DBD downtown zoning district. So it may be appropriate just to add one, just because it's an officially recognized district that has special sign requirements. Now, on flags, and specifically the temporary type flags that sometimes people will stick in the ground, often known as pennant flags, right now our regulations say you can have one on your property, but we don't have it 100% clarified in terms of where you can put it. And so sometimes people will put it right by the road where it's barely on private property, but it's still close enough to the road that it may be a visibility hazard. If there's strong gusts of wind, it's happened before where they've fallen down into the road, and so that's a hazard. Also, we've got businesses where if it's 5 tenants in a multi-tenant strip center on the same piece of property, they're fighting over the ability to have a flag, or who got there first. Yours is tattered. You need to get it down so that my business can have one for a while. And so, just code enforcement and working with these groups, the proposal anyway, which is again recommended by Planning Commission and reviewed by the city attorney, is that instead of one per property, each business could have a temporary type flag, but it would have to be within 25 feet of their main entrance to get it off the road. And then the next one is about electronic signs, in which the regulations of our general standard would not change. It's just clearing up the language to essentially say, if you've got an electronic sign that you want to have, it's totally prohibited, so totally not allowed downtown. And that's things like wall signs, freestanding signs, things like that. And totally not allowed, totally prohibited on residential use properties. That's how it is right now, just the language is not quite so clear. And then...
That's the way it is currently, or that's the proposed way it's going to be?
That's the way it is currently. The regulations would not change, just that specific wording that's strong and clear, saying it's not allowed, no time, no way, so as there's no nuances, no even thought by a, business or a sign company, that, oh, well, your language says this, so gotcha. We want to make the language as clear and understandable as possible.
So what are we going to do with every business downtown that has an open sign flashing?
Now, window signs downtown that are electronic on a certain size, no more than essentially 2x2 or 1x3, depending on if you've got a beer bottle or an open sign, something like that. Those are allowed, but again, they've got to be very small.
Okay.
The next one is related to, again, electronic signs, specifically freestanding electronic signs. And this is, again, this is not downtown. This is not residential use properties, because we just mentioned they're not allowed there at all. But in other areas, right now we've got inconsistent language in the sense of some places you've got a static electronic freestanding sign. It changes once every 10 seconds. Some places you've got a static electronic freestanding sign. It changes once every minute. Again, in both cases, totally static, and it can't have any kind of fade, dissolving, motion, whatever. It's whether it's a gas station sign or a church sign or something like that, it's got to be totally static. But having the two time frames is something that code enforcement and businesses have seen is strange and may not be the most appropriate way to handle this, since again they're all static. So the proposal moving forward would be everywhere that it is allowed within those narrow confines, it would be static, and you could change it once every 10 seconds for an electronic freestanding sign. What we've also seen along with that, though, in comparing Cartersville to other jurisdictions, is that it's not appropriate to have, even on a business property, an electronic freestanding sign near a single-family house. So we would add a restriction requiring that there be at least 100 feet between an electronic sign and a single-family house. And then also, we've compared with other Georgia cities and counties, and we do not currently have a restriction on electronic freestanding signs on 2 or 3 road frontage lots, meaning somebody who had 2 road frontages could have 2 electronic freestanding signs, and that may not be appropriate. And compared to other Georgia jurisdictions, it may be appropriate to add some new language saying, you've got a piece of property, even if you've got 3 road frontages, you can still only have 1 electronic freestanding sign. So we add some restrictions there. Wall signs, we just clear up the language. We don't change the regulations. We just make it clear. Same thing with wall signs, particular to the downtown business district. You have any questions?
You good?
Is there any signs currently like downtown or inside these areas that will not conform to these new rules and regulations, and if so, are they just grandfathered in?
I'm not aware of downtown any, but for example, just outside downtown at the corner of Tennessee Street and Main Street, where Papa John's used to be, there's a tidal pond now, and it's a 3-sided freestanding sign. It could stay as long as that sign stays.
Okay.
You
So
know,
it's grandfathered in?
yeah, I mean, it'd be grandfathered in.
Any other questions for Richard on this? Thank you, sir. This is first reading, no vote required. We do need to have a public hearing relative to that.
No, not the
No?
signs.
Oh, since it's
On the
text
next
message,
one,
gotcha.
yeah.
Next item is T1402. Mr. Menino, I know you're handling that one. You told me that.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a proposed text amendment to the zoning ordinance dealing with the special use permit section. This is trying to clear up some language. In the past, we've allowed the special use permit for expansion of a non-conforming use as long as it goes through the planning commission, meets certain criteria, which they in turn make a recommendation to y'all, so it goes through a public process. And we've done this for a few sites. In the hearing of a actual use permit, I'll be brief. In the hearing of an actual use permit, it was brought up that there were some concerns with our language in wanting to know if we were actually utilizing the use permit for something it was suitable for. After that case, got with the city attorney and we clarified the language. Therefore, it's pretty clear that the use permit for the expansion, as long as it's going through the planning commission and city council to hear it and look at criteria, that it would be allowed. So it's basically a cleanup, housekeeping and cleanup in our ordinance, because it was brought up by another attorney in concern with the way it was worded.
Okay. Any questions for Randy on this item?
Do we need to
It's relative-
evaluate?
Do you know what a civil emergency message is? Does anybody know?
What'd y'all get?
Chiefs,
bu-
what'd y'all get on your
buzzed
phone?
City's not sure yet. Tell me if the building's gonna blow up, okay?
It was time to get out.
No questions for Randy, you did great.
That couldn't happen during the audit.
You won't beat the guys in the back, though.
But we do need a public hearing this, since it's relative to zoning, or no?
Yes,
Since it-
yes.
Okay. All right, I will open up a public hearing relative to T1402. Anybody wish to speak for or against may do so at this time? And surprisingly, nobody getting up to speak about it, so I'll close the public hearing. Again, we'll take this up for final consideration at our first meeting in March. Mr. Riggs and then Mr. Jones, Natural Gas Association Georgia membership dues.
Yes, Mayor, this is a newly formed organization. Its purpose is to promote the use of natural gas, and I ask your approval to pay the $5,000 dues.
Okay, any questions, comments, or motions?
Motion to approve. Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Bob, you're up next, sir. And please, Mr. Jones.
Mr. Mayor, the Environmental Protection Division has created a new database. This database is used to apply for and do compliance reporting for the permits that we use to operate the water and wastewater plant. We are required to submit a subscriber agreement in which a responsible official is named. We are asking that you designate the Water Department Director as that responsible official that will allow us to maintain those permits with this new system. Yes.
All right. Any questions, comments, or motions?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries
Bob.
unanimously. Thank you, Bob. Ms. Courier, you are next, followed by Chief Carter.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As outlined in the Cartersville Master Plan and Downtown Cartersville Master Plan, there's been a desire for a covered pavilion in Friendship Plaza. The Downtown Development Authority Board of Directors has approved the up to $40,000 to be used bid funds to construct this pavilion. We have sent out requests for proposals to local architects and are hoping to get a contract in place quickly with a project manager. Ron Goss Jr. with Pennant Construction has been asked to help us oversee this project because it is on city property. Assistant City Attorney asked that we certainly get your blessing to construct this on the property there in Friendship Plaza. Downtown Development Authority Board has recommended your approval.
Okay. Any questions for Tara on this item? And if there are none, a motion's in order.
So, wait a minute, so you haven't decided upon your architect yet? This is just project management though, right?
Correct. We had 2 architects locally that actually submitted requests for proposals, and we would like to get the input of the project manager before we make the official selection.
Gotcha, thank you.
Okay. Any
Make a
other?
motion. Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Chief Carter, and you know anything more about that thing that had everybody's phone buzzing?
No, sir, not yet. We're working on
Or waited in with
Yeah, everybody's Googling it.
bated anticipation? Go right
Go to
ahead.
Facebook, it'll tell you.
No, it'll just say, what was my Amber Alert? Huh? Call Carrie.
it. Mayor and Council, I bring
Thank
before
you.
you tonight a budgetary item, budgeted item. This is, we're requesting the approval for the purchase of a new vehicle for the fire department. This particular vehicle will be a 1-ton heavy utility truck, 4x4 crew cab type chassis. The vehicle is actually used to pull heavy trailers and haul fire hose, other heavy equipment to and from emergency scenes. During non-emergency hours, the vehicle will actually be used to pull the fire safety house to all the schools as far as part of our pub ed program. As far as the bids were concerned, we hand delivered these bids to 7 different local vendors personally within the community for the dealerships and also bed manufacturing firms. And we only had 1 local vendor, a dealer, submit an actual bid to come back. No local construction firms as far as the utility bed is concerned. As we went through the pricing, we wanted to do this to where we did not do a turnkey. We actually split this up to where we're going to buy the cabin chassis. We're going to have the utility bed manufactured, and then we're going to have it later to pull some of the middle bin out and try to drive the cost down. And we were successful with that. And we're respectfully requesting approval of the following 3. For the cabin chassis, it would be Prater Ford of Calhoun, price of $41,546.20. H&M Trailer of Adairsville for the bed, $4,135. Coosa Valley Communications for the emergency light and warning package for $3,580. So we respectfully request this evening approval on this project of $49,261.20.
Okay. Any discussion on this item? It is a budgeted item.
Chief, how often is this kind of a truck used?
This truck, to be quite honest with you, this is the first one that we've ever had to our fleet such as this. During the inclement weather, it'd be a great deal of activity. During the day, as I said, on non-emergency hydrant painting details, it's just a multitude of uses. And this is also going to enable us to be able to keep our fire trucks off the road for certain type of activities and keep those in the house. So this is a new addition to our fleet that's actually going to save us manpower and money in the long run.
So you don't have any anticipation of the number of years or road miles you can put on?
Well, we anticipate this truck giving us a good 10, 15 years worth of service.
Won't be the same as a fire truck. I mean, it'll be.
Yes,
quick.
ma'am.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? If not, a motion's in order.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank
Mr. Anderson, you're up next.
Yes, sir, Mayor and Council. This is for the replacement of the pool pack for the Senior Aquatic Center. We repaired this, the same coil last year in May when we had other work done. To repair a leak again this year is going to be almost $7,900. We felt the best path to go was to get us something that lasts us for about hopefully 5 to 6 years. I recommend the low bid from Johnson Controls in the amount of $23,327.
Just so you all know, this takes the water out of the air in the pool. I asked him what it did.
It's like a giant dehumidifier.
Now, does this,
It also helps in the heating of the pool also.
I'm curious, what's the difference between an epoxy-coated coil and a copper coil? Just the material?
About $12,000.
That's all it is? Just
Well,
money?
of course, the copper is the top of the line, is the better, and that's what ours is.
Yeah.
And it's lasted, going on 9 years. And so we chose the lesser of the two to hope to get us, our pool pack. We figure that when the warranty goes out on the compressors that we did last year, that it'll be time to be replaced. And so we're trying to, hopefully everything will end right all together.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Not a motion's in order.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Just a
Before-
question, if I may.
Go ahead.
Did we, Connie, on that last item on the vehicles, did we include lease pool in there? I don't know if I caught that or not. We may want to note that for the minutes. That's,
Yeah, it was a lease pull out. I know it's in our packet.
yeah.
Before we get to the financial statement, there is Chair will accept a motion to add an item to the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item is added. Mr. Osborne's going to do this one, all right?
Thank you, Mayor. This is related to our first-time homebuyer program. 24 Georgia Boulevard, the homeowner has used the $10,000 loan program, lived in the house for the 5-year period required. Now that it's over, Ms. Jones would like to sell her house. The lien needs to be released before the closing can occur. City Attorney's Office has reviewed the quitclaim deed and recommends it approval.
Any questions or discussion on this item? And if there's none, a motion's in order.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Reinhardt, you've got the financial report, and as was said before, I want to congratulate you on getting on the other side of that audit.
Thank you.
You and your team, and on a job well done. So,
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Honorable Mayor and Council, we'll be looking at the December 2014 and comparing it to December 2013. Excuse me. In the general fund, revenues increased over last year by $689,000. Expenses have decreased by $1.1 million. If you remember, I'm sorry, this is due basically to the increased personnel expenses and increased capital expenses combined with decreased operating expenses. Remember, in December of 2013, we did transfer $1.3 million to pay off the TANs that were owed by the SPOS fund. 3 areas of revenue that I monitor on a monthly basis are the local option sales tax. There's an increase there of about $203,000. Police fines and forfeitures, there's a decrease of roughly $40,000. Building permits and inspection fees have an increase of roughly $26,000. The water and sewer fund revenues increased over last year by $897,000. Expenses decreased by $797,000. This is due mainly to decreased operating expenses, decreased debt service expenses, and decreased capital expenses. In the gas fund, revenues have increased from December of 2013 by $597,000. Expenses increased by $910,000. This is due to increased operating expenses and increased costs of purchased gas. In the electric fund, revenues have increased from last year by $1.7 million. Expenses increased by $1.3 million. This is due to increased personnel expenses, increased costs of purchasing electricity, and increased capital expenses. In the stormwater fund, revenues decreased from last year by $31,000. Remember, 2013, we had a pre-disaster mitigation grant, which we no longer have this year. Expenses increased by $127,000. This is due to increased personnel, increased operating expenses, and increased capital expenses. In the solid waste fund, revenues increased from last year by $28,000, and expenses decreased by $39,000. This is due mainly to decreased personnel expenses coupled with increased operating expenses. And lastly, fiber optics fund, revenues increased from last year by $75,000, and expenses have increased by $72,000. This is due to increased personnel expenses, increased operating expenses, and increased capital expenses. And that is my report for the evening.
Okay, any questions for Tom on the financial report?
Just to note, water looks pretty good, but in talking with Bob, let's not get too excited about the money. It looks like it's in there because we're gonna have to fund the Highway 20 project out of there. That'll also pull some extra money out of cash, which looks kind of flush right now too, just FYI.
Okay, very good. Any questions or discussion items?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there any other business that needs to come before council this evening? If there is none, Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We're adjourned.